According to the computer. Hello, hello. This is Kathy from Limitless Women Rising. This is an interview series designed for women who are having that calling to step out into something bigger, better into the world. And sometimes we come face to face with these things of having to sell what it is that we've come up with. So it could be a stumbling part, especially for people who are empathic or healers. And I reached out to someone who is both and can speak from both sides of the aisle here, as they say. And she's dialing in from beachside down at a vacation place. So we get to soak up some of those yummy vibes from Ann Hession as she shares with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, because like I said, you're both. Like, how did you come? I know you weren't always a healer. So how did this progression happen for you?
So yeah, well, I first got interested. I sometimes say I'm kind of a misfit. I have this unusual combination of being like an intuitive. I'm an energy healer, but I'm also a sales expert, right? I have literally millions of dollars in sales to my name in just the last like 5 years or so. And I don't mean like people buying stuff off a website. I mean like sales that happened because of a one-on-one conversation between me and somebody else, and they purchased, right? So, and there's not a lot of people who have both of that. I'm definitely not the only one, but I would say most healers, like in general, healers and coaches and what I call like heart-centered entrepreneurs are very blocked in that area. I like to say that they're allergic to sales, right? And they usually laugh when I say that because they're like, yeah,
you are right.
Kind of describes it. They may not actually break out in hives before they have to have a sales conversation, but they like kind of just like to, run away and hide, right?
Well, that and amazing how much of a day we can spend avoiding it, thinking we're doing it, and not truly going face to face with it. So I met Ann through the Emotion Code, and she was helping with some of the sales around that. Tell me like what it's like to sell
stuff like that. Yeah. Well, I've worked with Dr. Nelson and the crew over at Discover Healing for over 6 years now. And how that came about, I was telling you before, how it came about is I just happened to meet Natalie Nelson and Jean Nelson, Dr. Brad's daughter and wife, at an event, and they ended up hiring me to help them with the company, and I was a business coach and consultant at the time. And so that kind of progressed into later that year, me noticing that they didn't have anyone actually doing sales for the company. They were doing marketing, but they weren't actually having so. And I was like, I think that would make a really big difference for people to have someone that they could actually get on the phone with and get all their questions answered, and before deciding whether or not they want to move forward with this. And so I said, how about if I do it for you for, just a couple months to see how it is. And so I did. And now like 5.5 years later, I'm still, their primary salesperson because I love it. And I love what they do, and I love them. And I'm very, very good at selling those. So it's really about, it's the same as selling anything that you believe in, that you're behind. It's really about connecting with people, finding out why they're interested, finding out what matters to them, and offering solutions. So it's not like everyone I get on the phone with, I'm like, oh, let's sign you up. Like for some people, that's not the best next step for them. There's other stuff that's more important for them to do first, or maybe it's just not a fit for them. So that's how heart-centered sales works. That it's always about putting the relationship first, right, as opposed to just trying to put the transaction first. And I think that's thinking that sales is always about putting the transaction first is why heart-centered people suck at sales. I'm just going to call it like it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
They think that that's what sales is. And it's like, well, sales can be that. We've all had that experience where we're dealing with a salesperson who wasn't listening to us, wasn't paying attention, was just trying to sell us something without really understanding our needs, right? We've all had that experience.
Yeah.
But to me, that's not what sales really is, So I make the distinction. I call it heart-centered sales because it really is all about putting the relationship first. So that's kind of how I got connected to that world. And of course, I just fell in love with the emotion code and the body code. So along the way, I've been a certified practitioner for over 5 years now. So I do have my own practice, and I love doing that. And I still work with them, but I also have really put my focus more recently into helping other heart-centered entrepreneurs like myself break through what I think is the single biggest thing that's holding them back, which is
and I want to underscore that this is the single biggest thing, that you could have the best service in the world, and if you're not able to connect and give that gift to somebody else, then why bother having it? So
it's just, and then it's I would argue, and again, I'm coming from a background as a business coach and consultant too. I've been self-employed most of my adult life, right? So decades of being self-employed. Sorry for that background noise. Can you guys hear that little plane going by? So there's one thing I like to help people get, because one of the things that I think happens with not only like the heart-centered people, like healers and coaches, but I think it's them especially, is they focus on marketing. They focus on, I just have to I just have to reach more people. I need to have a website. I need this. I need that.
Yeah, and let's stop and make the distinction. That's my background is marketing, and so it's great. You can like cast out those messages and do advertising or those things, but it's like, until you're to the point where you're making that conversation, like you said, eyeball to eyeball with someone, heart to heart.
But if you can't then convert that into a sale. So one of the things that I like to make the distinction, so marketing, all the marketing is just getting the right message out in front of the right people, so that they reach out. They go like, hey, I'm interested, or I want to find out more, or you're talking about me. Just they raise their hand in some way. That's all marketing is. And sales is really responding and communicating with those people, just those people, just the ones who raise their hands.
Yeah, so when they show up, then what do you say?
And finding out why, not just jumping into an offer, but actually finding out why. And why they raise their hand, why they're interested. It's not necessarily because they're interested in working with you. It might be because they know someone who you might want to connect to, or whatever. You're like, I have to stop and find out why they're interested. And, finding out more and finding out what matters to them. And if appropriate, then offering to talk further or to work with them. But that's, in a nutshell, that's the difference between marketing and sales. And so there's a pretty famous statistic out there that it's a little old, but I think it's still valid. It basically is, you probably heard it, that, most small businesses go out of business within 5 years, right? Like it's pretty, I think it's been that way for a long time, right? And I would say there's a lot of reasons you could say, but I think that the biggest reason why most businesses can't get past that 5-year mark is because of marketing. You can build a business to a certain level of revenue just by kind of working what I would call your own network, right? Places where you're already sort of known and all that. But then there's a point at which you've exhausted that. And that's where you actually really have to you really have to understand how to market what you have to offer to people who've never heard of you, have no reason to pay attention to you at all. Okay. And most businesses, I'm going to say that point comes up after like 2 or 3 years, where if you don't at that point really figure out how to market, like what is your message, who are you trying to reach, you're going to just end up petering out. So, you know what I'm talking about, right? Because you're in marketing. So I would say marketing, not knowing how to market, will end your business or cause it to just kind of peter out or not really make you any money within 5 years. Not knowing how to do sales, though, will have you go out of business within 2 to 3 years because you don't know even how to do in your network so not having sales will kill your business faster than not having marketing.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it's the number one skill, the most important skill you do.
Yeah. And it's so hard, as healers. I think we come into this with certain oaths and vows of not being seen. Like it didn't use
visibility is huge. And it's a block for both marketing and sales.
Right. So being seen, like, and that's what's so cool, that you've got the two, because the emotion code is all about releasing the trapped emotions that we might have inherited or that we picked up for ourselves along the way. Mm-hmm. And also the oaths and vows, it can be from any time. It might be inherited or generational even. So
yes.
what a
Absolutely.
cool 1-2 punch you're offering
Yes.
people.
Yeah, because you do have to get rid of those internal blocks. But if you only get rid of the internal blocks and you don't also learn the skills, then you're still not, you got to be both. Sales is this is the thing that I think is one of the biggest mistakes that people make,
Yeah.
is that they don't understand that sales is just a set of skills. It's just a set of skills. You learned how to do the emotion code. You learned how to do you learned how to cook or whatever it is you're skilled at. You learned it. And you can learn sales too, but you have to learn it. You have to learn that set of skills. But when you combine the two, which is what my program teaches, you're clearing the blocks and you're learning the skills. That's when the magic really happens.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little insight into some of these skills?
Sure. So there's actually, well, there's a gift that I have for everybody that they can sign up for. When we're done, we can put the link out for them.
We
But it's
love gifts.
yes, it's a free gift. It's a training guide called in Sales Conversation Secrets, and it's about what I find one of the single biggest mistakes that people make in sales, and they make it really early on in the conversation, so it kind of kills off the possibility of the conversation actually leading to you getting a client, because you make this so early on. Right?
Buzz kills.
Yeah, right. So indeed, everyone can download that later to get it in detail, but the short version is, it's kind of what I was just talking about. When people ask you some version of, hey, tell me more about what you do, right? So they might actually say, tell me more. They might say, oh, that's interesting, or how'd you get into that, or that interests me, or whatever. But they're saying something that adds up to, tell me more about what you do, right? And then the mistake that people make is they start to tell them more, which is the worst thing you could do.
Oh.
Okay. And I know that it seems like, your brain goes, oh my God, they want to know. Right? Yay, someone's asking, right? And so what do we tend to do? We tend to go either, well, yeah, exactly what you just said. And they're like, oh, right? Or the other one sometimes people do is we barely spit anything out, right? Because we're like, change the subject, right? But the most common one is like, because they're asking. So we just start telling them all this stuff, because couldn't you talk about what you do for like 6 hours?
Yeah.
You tell it because you love it and it's so amazing and there's so many stories and there's your story and all stuff. Well, here's the thing, you don't know why they asked, right? What if they only asked because they actually have a referral for you?
Right.
They just want to find out a little bit more because their sister has been, let's say you're an energy healer. What if they just had a conversation or with somebody that they met the other day who was interested in that, and they're like, oh, well, I just met someone who's interested in that, but they haven't, said that to you. They're just like, tell me more about what you do, and you go, and then they're like, okay, I don't know. Whereas if you had said, here's the magic words, when they say, tell me more, right? I'd love to, but first let me ask what interests you about that, right? So I'm not like not going to answer their question, but I'm going to find out why they're interested.
Yeah.
In the example I just gave, then that person would be like, oh, well, I just met someone yesterday who's looking for an energy healer. So what a coincidence. Right? You're like, oh, great. And then that's a different conversation, right? Than if they said, oh, well, I've been curious about that. And, I studied this, and is your thing like, that's a different conversation, right? So you're finding out. I actually break it down in this training, the free training that I'm giving you guys. There's actually 5 things to do in response to someone saying, tell me more. And once you understand them, they make a lot of sense. It's not like a lot to keep track of, but you can see how if you leave any one of them out, it's really unlikely that you're going to have an effective sales conversation. So that's it's one of the absolute biggest mistakes people make, because they make it right at the beginning.
Right.
The conversation is over. That's when you get thanks for answering all my questions.
I think the restaurant's over there, right? Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's a really common one.
Yeah. Cool. And so what would be, Can you take us through what the 5 are, or is that?
Sure. I mean, just a short version. And again, you guys can,
Yeah.
you get it on, you can read through it and stuff. But yeah, first we want to find out why they're, why they asked, why they're interested, find out why that matters to them, right? So, because we just fill in the blanks. We think we understand, we think they know what it matters to them. Find out if they're actually interested in any kind of change, right? Just because something, just because they have an interest doesn't mean they're actually motivated.
Right. So
to do
stages of
anything,
change.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Good to know.
After you've done all that, if it makes sense, that's when you actually get to tell them more. But like 2 sentences tops, not the whole thing that you want to, right? Just very, very short, sweet, to the point. And then it depends. And then the 5th depends on how the conversation started. It's different if they contacted you, like they were on your website, they contacted you because they're interested in finding out. Then the step 5 would probably, would be kind of exploring that. But if you just met them at, say, like a cocktail party or something, right? Or like that's happening nowadays. But
Virtual.
It was
virtual network.
It was not a sales conversation to start with. It was just a conversation. And as happens in conversations, people ask about what you do, right? So the 5th thing to do then, which is, really where it comes down to this whole authentic heart-centered sales, is you actually acknowledge that the conversation is now becoming a different conversation, which people don't do. They want to just skip over that piece because it's uncomfortable. But when you actually say, like, now they're expressing some interest, they've actually shared something that they're dealing with that you could help them with, they're showing, then, you can say something like, oh, this is, maybe becoming a conversation about, us looking at working together, which is not where the conversation started. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Would you like to explore that, or did you already get everything you need, or something like that, right? It's very authentic. Can you get it? It's like, there's no pressure. There's no like, oh, let's just acknowledge something is different now.
Yeah.
So simple things like that. It's all about really being present. It's about being in the moment. One of the main things that I teach is that the most powerful and effective thing you can ever do is just be yourself right here and right now. And that's an example of that, right? You're kind of calling the situation what it is instead of skipping over the part that's uncomfortable. Make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so glad I get to be the first to download your gift. Yeah. And it is just, it's so fascinating to me to see that healers as a group, it's so universal that we all have this resistance about the sales process. And like you said,
oh yeah,
it feels like the energy of manipulation and
yeah, that's how we have it. We have that it's about manipulation. It's about lying. It's about try to convince people or persuade people to do something they don't want to do. There's so much stuff. I mean, that's one of the things we look at is kind of uncover and just pull out all of that crap, that's there. But the bottom line is sales can be whatever you say it is, right? And so one of the things, some of the people listening might be people who've done some sales training at some point in their life for one job or another. And one of the things that so I've done a lot of sales training. I've been trained by some, extraordinary people. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the majority, not all, but the majority of sales training out there, especially sort of traditional sales training, is very, it's very high testosterone. Right? It's very male. If you look at the language of sales, it's very male. It's very like overcome objections, right? Right? There'll be like a whole section of the training. How do you overcome objections? And even just like closing the sale and in sales
always be closing.
Yeah, exactly. All the clothing and blah, blah, blah. And it is very male. And it's interesting for me as I kind of evolved how I do sales over the years and sort of noticing that, because I can do that. Like I can bring on that male energy, and I grew up with 2 older brothers. I can jump right into that, right? And I can do it and I can be effective at it, but I don't enjoy that, right? So at this point, I wouldn't, people do hire me to do sales for them for events and selling different things. And it's, first of all, I only do that if it's something that I believe in, of course. But also, if it has that energy, if it has that high testosterone energy, even if it's a good product, like if that's the energy of the company, I could do it, but I'm not, I would probably choose not to, because I prefer, again, what I call heart-centered sales, which is much more, it is actually the feminine energy,
Yeah.
right? It's about putting the relationship first, right? And really focusing on the connection. And, so I teach people to address and resolve objections rather than to overcome them.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, that the objection is, somebody's got a pain or an issue in their life that they've been desiring to overcome for a long time. And to me, I think of it as jumping over the chasm to listen to, what well, they've been suffering with that, what worked, hey, what hasn't worked, and to understand it's more of like an open-hearted conversation to see if you even are a fit. But
exactly. And you're not always, it's not like every conversation ends with, and here's what here's what you should do. Here's, that you are, honestly, most conversations that I have with people in a sales situation, I would usually have some kind of recommendation at the end, but it's not necessarily the recommendation to hire me or to buy the product or whatever. It's more like, what do I truly think is
that's a great point, because just
beneficial
leading
for
into
them.
that of recalibrating what the purpose of the conversation is, just to come up with the best recommendation, because I know a lot of these healers have a whole toolbox, and they know of other people who've got amazing tools too. So if that takes that pressure off your heart to say, I'm just going to connect them to the best things I know, that makes it a lot more authentic.
And when you're standing in that, so it's really about being of service, right? And also the things that, what that's congruent with, right, is that you're being of service and you're putting the relationship first, and you're really, trying to help them in the best way that you can. But it's also, here's the thing, being of service and trying to help them, that is what comes naturally to the healer, right? So if it's only that, you're still not necessarily going to be effective in sales. Okay, so one of the things that when I'm talking about is, it's also coming from standing in and owning your expertise, owning the fact that you are an expert in your field, even if you feel like, well, there's other people that are so much more expert than me. There'll always be people that are more expert than us. It doesn't mean that you're not an expert. Okay, you are more of an expert than the person you're talking to, right? And so there's a place in the making the recommendation that you think is in their best interest that's coming from a very powerful place. It is coming from service, it is coming from connection, but it's also coming from owning the fact that you're an expert and you are making an expert recommendation to them. And if your expert recommendation is that they should work with you, sorry, or for you, yeah, they should work with you, you're making that from a place of power and a place of service, both, right? Like, based on everything that you've told me, about what you're dealing with and what you want, my recommendation is this, right? And can you see how it's coming from a different place of not just trying to serve them. It's trying to serve them as someone who really knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, and I felt as you were saying that I was leaning into that, because you're going to lead me to the solution.
Yes.
And there's that trust that's beginning to open up.
Yeah.
I'm ready to follow you. I think
exactly. That comes from that. It comes from that confidence. And so that's one of the things that I, try to instill in people and train them to be, is to have that confidence and to own that.
Yeah.
And to not see it, because what happens with our heart-centered cells, our heart-centered healers, is we negate that. We're like, oh, I can't make that recommendation, or I can't think that's XYZ, right? That's blowing my own horn too much, or that's, me being greedy, or that's whatever, right? And it's like,
it's like the humility factor. It's like, oh, I can't.
But it's like, stand in the fact, if you think about it, so let's say you're doing it, let's say it's a conversation, whether it was a more casual or it was, like a free consult that you're doing, right? That people are coming in, they're talking. I don't do free sessions, by the way, but I do a free consult where people can talk and we can answer questions. And so let's say it's that. Well, especially if it's that, like they've actually booked to talk with you to find out about working with you. they really are coming to you for your expert opinion. And I think people lose track of that. Think of it, if you go and you make an appointment with a doctor, or you go make an appointment with a lawyer, or you go and make an appointment with a plumber, okay? Don't you want their expert opinion? Isn't that why you made the appointment? Right? Like,
I got a leak over here.
yeah, right? You don't want a plumber showing up and it's like, I don't really know what you should do. And so I think that's one of the most important places for, for a healer, coach, heart center person to stand. Like when you go into that conversation, remember, you actually have an obligation here, you have a responsibility here to give them your expert opinion. They're waiting for it.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerful place to stand going into the conversation.
I like that. So confidence sells.
It
That
does.
And so do you recommend that people, so energy healers in a way, it's very personal. So would you recommend that they have and I like the distinction that you made between a free session and a consult. So you're going to, in a consult, tell us about how you would recommend.
Sure. So I'm not saying what anyone else should or shouldn't do. I'm telling you what works for me.
Yeah.
But I don't offer a free session, like a sample session. It doesn't mean we all sometimes work for people on people for free just because we're moved to do that, and that's great. And I certainly don't have a problem with that at all. There's times when that just feels like the right thing to do, right, for all this. But in the general way of things, I don't offer a sample session. I do offer it's you can go on my website and just book it. It's a free 15-minute consult. So what I do there is I kind of ask them, so how did we get connected? Like why did you reach out to me? Tell me what's going on with you, right? And it's mostly me asking them questions. I certainly will answer any questions they have as well. But the key really is for you to be asking questions to find out, again, why did they raise their hand? If someone booking a free consult with you is a way of raising their hand. I want to talk with you. I want to find out more, right? So it's mostly about asking questions to find out where they are, what they want. But I usually ask a little bit about have they ever had energy healing before? Is that something that they, what their background is? Because it's going to be a different conversation if it's something that's brand new to them versus someone who, oh yeah, I've been doing that for years. There's a different type of conversation to be had. But it's mostly just trying to get at, I always like to say, you want to meet them where they are, right? So, well, if you have to meet them where they are, you have to know where that is. And to find out where that is, you got to ask them questions, right? So it's, like, what's the situation they're dealing with now? How long have they been dealing with that? These are just some of the questions you might want to ask. How long have they been dealing with that? How is it impacting them? Are there things in their life that's preventing them from doing this issue? What else have they already tried? Have they already been, sometimes they've tried everything under the sun, right? And again, that's going to be a different conversation than someone for whom it's a pretty new issue. It just started a couple months ago. They're not really sure. That's a very different conversation than someone that's been dealing with something for 20 years, right? So you want to try to get as full as you can and see what questions they have. And then for me personally, I'll, if needed, then I'll, kind of just give a short version of what it is that I do, connecting with the subconscious and finding out what sets of imbalances could be underlying the issue, and finding those and clearing them, and just to kind of explain how all that works and see, does that make sense to them? Like what is it? And I never, ever, ever come from a place of trying to convince people of anything. I actually love it when someone's kind of skeptical. And I'll flatly say it's great. I think it's great to be skeptical. I think you should be skeptical. Healthy skepticism is a great place to be. I even tell them, I was like, hey, look, I do this for a living and I'm still skeptical of it. I'll be working with someone and something will come up and I'm like, what? Doesn't make any sense to me. So it's fine. It's like, I'm skeptical too. And I can't deny the results, right? Yeah. So when you're coming from that kind of a place, it lets them know you're not afraid of them asking questions. You're not afraid of them being skeptical. You're totally welcome all that. And it's fine if it's not for them. If it's not for them, it's not for them. It's totally fine.
Quick question, asking for a friend. You've got somebody who is just stuck, like science-based kind of brain
Mhm.
that is stuck on the how can you how can you connect remotely, like this kind of thing. Is there,
Mhm.
do you just invite them to suspend that question and just see if the results speak for themselves,
Yeah.
or how do
I
you?
mean, I can tell you, I've certainly had people ask that. People ask that all the time.
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever had anybody who stayed stuck on it. I'm trying to think, like really stayed stuck on it. But I'll tell you, sort of the first thing I would usually say is, honest, I don't know.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know how it works. I know that it works. It kind of, I would, but one of the things I sometimes say is, I don't know how my cell phone works either, but I use it
That's
every day, right? And most people don't know how their cell phone works
yeah.
either. Now, on the other hand, we also know that there are people who do know how cell phones work.
Yes.
We're just not among them. And I don't know if anybody like really knows how it
It's
works.
true.
But sometimes that's all you need to say. It's
Yeah.
just it's, again, there's a place in coming from the confidence and being
Yeah.
not being afraid to say I don't know, right? And saying like I'll just say I can't deny the results. Like I've been doing this for 6 years, and people are getting, people get these results. If someone really wants to dig a little further, so my understanding is that you really can explain how energy healing works and how it works over distance, using quantum physics. And it has to do with quantum entanglements.
Mhm.
Now, I don't understand quantum physics, so I can't be, oh, let me explain to you how this works using quantum physics, because I don't understand quantum physics. But I do sometimes tell people that my understanding is that you really can. I've actually talked with some people. There's um, I've talked with someone who's doing like a master's thesis on this topic,
Right.
right? And like went in and pretty much proved that you can explain it through quantum physics. And I always find it really interesting because quantum physics is basically our most advanced science, right? It's like it's the
Right.
thing, right? Quantum physics. And quantum physics basically says everything's energy.
Yeah.
Right? And yet when we try to apply that to our physical bodies, then there's all like, well, that's not science. And it's like, well, kind of sort of is our most advanced science,
Yeah.
basically. so, so sometimes it's fun to kind of call people on that a little bit.
Yeah. So have you ever run into a healer that was afraid to charge good money, like what they were worth?
All the time, all the time. Yes, my
So
goodness,
what's
all
that
the
about, and how do we get over it?
time. I speak with healers who've been certified in whatever they do, whether it's motion code, body code, or something else for some time, and have still never charged anyone anything. They're hung up on charging at all. And most are hung up on charging this. I would say it's a minority, a small minority, who are charging and feeling, it's quite a few who probably feel good about what they're charging, but I think there's not very many who are charging like kind of on the upper end and really feeling totally confident about it. And that's why I did a free training back in May called Perfect Price Point, which was all about that, which a bunch of people did. Some of the people who watched this interview may have done that. It was all about that. It's about coming up with your own, coming up with the internal, going through an internal process to come up with pricing that you're aligned with. Because if you are a heart-centered person and you're not aligned with your own pricing, it's just not going to work for you. You're going to.
Right. And it's almost like an energetic you're putting
It
off
is an
before,
energetic
even
thing.
before you meet that person, like there's that sense that they're going to have. And so to me, I think it's going back and recognizing the blocks that we have. And again, so much as healers, I think is generational. It's like, okay, how much of that doesn't even belong to me? Okay. Whoa,
So
like
yeah,
85% of it, like bang, or
right.
do whatever technique you've got to release that, and then get really honest with where are you and how do you, what is the real impact that you're having on the trajectory of somebody's life. If you can heal
Absolutely.
them to get over, I call it like the pain of our lives, kind of like the distraction, keeping people in their small selves. It's like, if you can relieve that glass
Yes.
ceiling for them, then what's
How do
possible?
you even put a price on it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the most common things, and we get into this in the training, is that people get hung up on thinking that they're being paid for their time.
Right.
And when I said you're not being paid for your time, I mean, yes, it does take some certain amount of time to do what you do, but you're being paid for the value that you bring, being paid for the, in some cases, decades of experience and training that you have. And, I kind of, there's a story that I heard, and I use it as an example in that training, but the story is about an artist, and the artist has a business owner asked the artist to design a logo or something, design a graphic for a marketing campaign. And the artist says, yeah, great. The graphic artist goes, and comes back 20 minutes later and has this thing and, and says, that'll be a couple $1,000s. And he's like, that's outrageous. And he loves it, but he's like, that's outrageous. You know what? It took you 20 minutes. It's like, you're not paying for 20 minutes of my time. You're paying for 6 years of art school and the internship I did with the international designer and my 20 years of experience that allowed me to create something that good in 20 minutes. That's what you're paying for. And it's like, oh, okay.
Right. Yeah. It's a
So
great,
it's a good analogy.
it truly is. It truly is. Wow. Well, you've just given us a bunch to tease out and really sit with for ourselves. And, I really wanted to encourage everyone to listen through this and to explore Ann's generous gift that she's sharing with us with the 5 parts.
Yes.
I'll put in the below the link to your website. Is there anything else we should know, or any?
Just, I really want you to, so a couple of things. So you can download that training. It's just free PDF training. It's very sort of micro. I break it down into the little pieces. So it's like, you can just really get it, right? And at the end of that, or before that, I also would welcome you to join. I have a Facebook group that's called Sales and Success Conversations for Heart-Centered Entrepreneurs. So
I love that. I didn't know about that.
So please feel free to join the group. Again, it's called Sales and Success Conversations for Heart-Centered Entrepreneurs. Long title, but that'll get you there.
That's who we are.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I actually do a couple times a month, I do free energy healing and clearing stuff in there, and we have conversations and promote stuff. So, and I actually have, there's a book that I wrote a chapter of around creating online programs out of your expertise that's going to be coming out towards the end of August. So if you do sign up, if you do download my the free gift, then you'll be on my list, and you'll get a notification about that too. So it's something you might want to check out. If you've ever thought that in addition to just doing sessions and stuff, that there's something you'd like to teach, right? Another thing that's really common for heart-centered people, there's ways to create that and teach it online and stuff, which is what I've done, and it's such a joy. So I highly
especially
recommend.
Right now with the a lot of people are taking their businesses online, and it's a whole new frontier. So
yes, the book's called Teach Your Expertise. It's coming out later this month, and it's 20 different entrepreneurs like myself and our stories, and mostly healers and coaches, people like us, right? And how they were able to really teach their expertise, and it's an extraordinary way to have a bigger reach and a bigger business as well. So
yes. Dynamite stuff. And thank you for the gift of sharing your time with us, beaming in from vacation the way you are. We so appreciate time and knowledge, and like I said, I'll be number 1 to download your
all right, great. I just did that. So.
Okay.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.